Hey guys, there are videos like this that exist, but I wanted to do my Too Many Records take on it. This is a video that's going to be for people new to the hobby and old to the hobby, because if you're new to the hobby, you're probably wondering, how should I build my collection? What are some essential records that I should put in it? Hopefully this video will answer some of those. And for people that have big collections already, count this as a checklist to see if you have all the records that I'm talking about. And if you don't, it's time to remedy that. And if you don't know any of these, it's time to listen. The albums I picked for this are not my favorite albums of all time. There's another series I have on the channel about that. This is more so essential records. And there's a couple different ways to look at essential. Whether they're extremely important for the era they came out in, or the genre that they reside in, or they sound amazing on vinyl. Sometimes all three. So without further ado, let's dive into the list. I'm going to give you 20 picks. Some are kind of obvious, as you guys may expect, but they're very important to still mention for newbies, because there are people who just jump into the hobby and they really aren't sure what to do. So my big request from you guys is to enjoy this video and leave a comment with what you think are essential records for anyone's collection. And again, the big distinction here is that essential is not equivalent to your favorites. They're a little more objective, but again, I'm sure people are going to have disagreements with my list. It is my list. Do not think that this is the absolute end-all, be-all, you have to own these records. This is just what I think is a great start to a collection. In no particular order, Sufjan Stevens, Come On Feel the Illinoise. Sufjan is one of the greatest modern songwriters. He has a knack for writing extremely emotional, heartfelt storytelling songs. The lyrics are unbelievable. His voice is so comforting. And while this isn't my number one album of his, I will say this is the album that probably most people would consider to be his best. This album is a masterpiece. It is long. If you look at all the track titles, this album, I don't even know how long it is, but it's got to be close to an hour, if not more. Some of the song titles are insane on this, like The Predatory Wasp of the Palisades is out to get us, Out of Egypt and into the great laugh of mankind, and I shake the dirt from my sandals as I run. Now, it sounds like those could be Fall Out Boy songs too, but this album is so beautiful. Everybody knows the main track, Chicago, which is the #1 single from it. That's probably the most popular Sufjan Stevens song. Although with Mystery of Love coming out and all this stuff with Call Me By Your Name, I think those might have taken it over because he became a little more mainstream. That being said, this is an album you should absolutely pick up if you can find any version of it. I have the version with the balloon sticker on the cover, which was the original, because the original had a picture of Superman here, and the people that owned the rights to Superman were like, no. So they had to actually recall the jackets and throw this sticker on top. If I peeled it off, Superman would still be there, but that's like peeling off a Velvet Underground banana. You can't do that. You gotta just leave it intact if you find it intact. Nirvana's MTV Unplugged. Nirvana is a fantastic grunge band. And while I am a bigger fan of Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden, I do think Nirvana probably has the most mainstream appeal, and that's not a bad thing. I just think that their music is very nostalgic for a lot of people. You know, you've heard their big singles throughout your life, no matter what age you are. They're timeless, they're everywhere. And this performance in particular, rather than getting one of their studio albums, is probably the move because it sounds so damn good on vinyl. I could only find this repress, which has this nice kind of foil touching on the cover. It has a nice gatefold. It's on colored vinyl. But I will say, if you can find a pressing by Orade, which is an amazing label, their version sounds phenomenal. This sounds good, but that version is the one to look for. I just couldn't find it in my stack right now before I shot this video. This is such an iconic performance. Kurt Cobain in the green sweater. I mean, they have huge hits on here like Come As You Are, but also they do some amazing covers like The Man Who Sold the World and Where Did You Sleep Last Night. It's just a phenomenal performance, and it really will introduce you to more iconic Nirvana songs that are ones that aren't maybe Smells Like Teen Spirit or Lithium or Heart-Shaped Box, and kind of some of their deeper cuts that are just as catchy and just as heavy and awesome. This performance is a must-own. Radiohead's OK Computer. So again, not my favorite Radiohead album, but probably their most impactful. It is the beginning of their sound transition from kind of standard alt-rock into something a little more artsy, a little more indie, a little more experimental. This album is fantastic, and this is the OK Not OK box set edition, so it comes in this really hefty book, but you can find a standard press of this, or even a standard press of OK Not OK for fairly cheap, I think. Nothing too crazy. I love this box set because I'm a Radiohead fanatic, but this album is so fantastic. Some of their biggest hits like Paranoid Android and Karma Police are on here. Then you get surprised by songs like No Surprises. You get to rock out to songs like Electioneering. This album is iconic for any collector. I think it's one of the best albums ever made from just like a quality standpoint. And if you don't have anywhere that you've started with Radiohead, OK Computer is a great place to begin. But after that, I would check out Kid A and Rainbows as well. Kendrick Lamar to Pimp a Butterfly. This album is, again, not my favorite Kendrick album, but I think it's probably, quality-wise, his best album. This is his most ambitious album on both a sonic, thematic, and lyrical level. It really was a cultural movement when it came out that is still extremely relevant today. Kendrick is absolutely on his game when it comes to rapping on this album. He is really in the zone, and I think this album is almost without fault. From the amazingly bouncy and catchy King Kunta to the super vibey These Walls, the anthem All Right, the incredible discussion with the late great Tupac in Mortal Man. This whole album is just a masterpiece, and Kendrick Lamar is one of those rappers that kind of ties people together who are rap fans or who aren't rap fans. I feel like pretty much everyone appreciates Kendrick Lamar. He's just kind of infallible. I feel like he doesn't have anything that people are like really split on. He's just very consistently good. And this is a really great album to add to your collection. It's jazzy, it's soulful, it's hip-hop to the core, and I think that this album will be talked about forever. You can't have a record collection without the Beatles' Abbey Road, and I really, truly believe that. This is tied for my favorite Beatles album with Revolver, but Abbey Road really shows the beauty of the long play record format, and I'm talking about the medley on side B. All of side 2, if you didn't know, is meant to be played together because it is a medley. The songs bleed into each other, especially the final 3, Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, and The End, which put together is my favorite thing the Beatles have ever done. That's not to say side 1 is not without merit. Some of their best songs are on there as well. Come Together, Something, I Want You, She's So Heavy, which is one of the earliest heavy metal songs in my opinion. Abbey Road is a tried and true masterpiece, and this album is easy to find. You can go to any record store, they'll probably have it. If it's not a reissue, it'll be an original. It shouldn't cost you too much money, and I promise you, when you put it on your turntable, you're going to understand why people love vinyl. This one might polarize a little bit. Billie Eilish, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? If you haven't heard Billie Eilish yet, you must have just been born, because Billie Eilish has been making huge waves for the past few years. What may seem like another young teen pop star on the surface, if you don't do any investigation, you will be completely subverted within your expectations with a masterfully produced album. The bass on this album is unbelievable on vinyl. Her brother Phineas does such good production on this, and Billie just coasts through every single song with confidence of someone well beyond her years. And every song is catchy. Every song could be the single. It's one of those albums that's just front to back an amazing listen, and it surprises people of all ages. I know people in their 50s that love this album. I know people in their teens that love this album. It really transcends all barriers that some music kind of fits into, and I think this is an album that everybody should own. I think that Billie is, on the precipice of releasing her next album, and I believe it's probably going to be just as good as this, but this album in particular is way more than the single Bad Guy. It is just a collection of songs that is fantastic. I am not a huge jazz fan, but I am a huge bossa nova fan. So Getz Gilberto is absolutely an album that everybody should own. This is one of those albums that I have many pressings of. I have the Analog Productions pressing, I have the Mo-Fi, I have an original, I have a repress. It's one of those things where it's just, you gotta always have a copy on hand. It is perfect relaxing music. It is perfect dinner party music. It's perfect to sit around and listen to some amazing bossa nova inspired jazz by two of the greatest to ever do it, Stan Getz and João Gilberto. This album is known for the single The Girl from Ipanema, which is obviously one of the biggest songs from the bossa nova genre. You're also featuring Antonio Carlos Jobim, who is an absolute bossa nova legend in his own right. This is the gateway into enjoying Brazilian music. I think if you love this, you should definitely dive into some of these artists, João and Jobim in particular, and kind of see what their catalog has to offer, because a lot of it is really, really good. Every collection needs to have a copy of this. Eva Cassidy's Songbird. This was actually recommended to me in my TMR Facebook group maybe 6 months ago, and I had never heard of her, and it's an absolute crime that it took me 32 years of my life to actually discover how amazing her music is. Unfortunately, she has passed away, which is a huge tragedy. She passed away a while ago, but she left us with a legacy of just unbelievable music. I believe her story kind of mirrors that of Jeff Buckley, an extremely talented musician that had so much promise and could have gone so far, but unfortunately had an untimely death. And they're left with a legacy that, you know, they'll be remembered forever for what they gave us in their life. Eva Cassidy has one of the greatest voices I've ever heard in music, without question. She is just breathtaking when it comes to her vocal range and tone. Most of her music is covers of standards or other people's songs that were written so that she could sing them. On this in particular, she covers Sting's Fields of Gold, which I don't love that song, but her version, chef's kiss. The song I Know You by Heart is where I started with her, and that is one of the most beautiful tracks I have ever heard. Over the Rainbow, her rendition is just like jaw-dropping. This is a record, if you can track it down, that will absolutely show you how good music can sound on vinyl, but also introduce you to the world of Eva Cassidy if you don't know her already. Tears for Fears, Songs from the Big Chair. This is what I believe to be the greatest new wave album ever. I know that's kind of a bold statement, but these two were absolute powerhouses in their height of their career. They split ways eventually, and then their music both kind of went in different directions, was never quite as good. But this album, their second one, oh my God. The big singles from this are Shout, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and Head Over Heels. Mother's Talk was a pretty big one too. But every song on this record is just in-your-face, bombastic production, incredible silky voices, you know, intense lyrical themes at times, especially like Everybody Wants to Rule the World was so relevant in the 80s when this came out. This album on vinyl sounds so damn good. I promise you, you will not regret picking this one up. There's a MoFi version of this, but I have an original US press and I can't imagine it sounding any better than this. We're stepping into trip-hop territory now with Massive Attack's Mezzanine. This is maybe the seminal trip-hop album. If you don't know what trip-hop is, it's hip-hop inspired electronic music that has a very sultry, syrupy beat to it. It's very entrancing and sensual and just really fun to listen to in a laid-back environment. Some of the bigger names are Thievery Corporation, Massive Attack, Portishead, but Mezzanine in particular is probably the magnum opus of the genre. The song Teardrop, which I think was the main single from it, is just so good. And one of my favorite musicians, Jose Gonzalez, actually does an amazing acoustic cover of it. But if you don't know trip hop, start with Mezzanine, and I can almost guarantee you'll fall in love with it because it's one of those genres that anyone could enjoy. It doesn't require you to be a fan of hip hop or electronic music. It's just good music. Every collection needs a little Bowie. Some need a lot of Bowie, but you need at least one Bowie. And if you're going to only have one David Bowie record, it's got to be Ziggy Stardust. The rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars is probably my favorite Bowie record. I don't know, it's so hard to say. The man is absolutely, absurdly prolific. But the songs that you would probably recognize from it are Moon Age Daydream, which Guardians of the Galaxy helped to make extremely popular, Starman, Ziggy Stardust, and Suffragette City. But the whole thing is like a wonderful collection of songs. It's almost like a musical. And I think this is Bowie in his prime. This version of Bowie, he's firing on all cylinders, and all of these songs will last the test of time forever, and they also sound great on vinyl. So if you have a chance to pick up a copy of this, I would absolutely do so without hesitation. Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Now this album is said to not sound great on vinyl, and I will say it doesn't sound audiophile, but I do think that the criticisms are not fully warranted. It sounds good enough to own, but this really shows you what packaging can do for the artistic element of a record. It has this massive triple gatefold where there's multiple different inserts that you can put within the window to show different covers, which is really cool. Really luxurious jacket, just the whole presentation of it is wonderful, huge spine. The music itself though, this is considered by most people to be one of the greatest hip-hop albums of all time, if not of the 2000s at the very least. It has something for everybody, whether it's a collab with Bon Iver, Elton John playing piano and doing some vocals, incredible rap legends like Raekwon on some tracks, you got Kid Cudi, you even have a Chris Rock interlude. I mean, this album is a sonic masterpiece, it is a conceptual masterpiece, and I think everybody should own this. People that are like, I'm not a huge fan of Kanye, are like, but that My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is pretty good though. And it's kind of hard to argue. Even people that aren't big rap fans gravitate to this album. I just think it is so perfectly done. He had so much to prove on this album. This was on the tail of his VMA outburst with Taylor Swift. So the world kind of hated Kanye at the time, and he went into a dark place and then went to Hawaii and recorded with all of these legends and came out with maybe his greatest album to date. So if you don't own this, definitely pick it up. The Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, one of the greatest psychedelic albums ever made. This version in particular is by a company called Analog Productions. I referenced them earlier in the video. They specialize in really high quality audiophile pressings of records. This one is no exception, and this version of the record is the 33 RPM one, but it sounds like, when I first heard it, I was literally speechless. I couldn't even, like, my brain was breaking. It was so perfectly recorded and replicated through my system and my speakers. This is probably the nicest sounding record I own, just from a pure audio standpoint. But I mean, everybody loves this record. Whether it's Sloop John B or it's God Only Knows, Wouldn't It Be Nice? Some of their biggest hits are on here, but the whole thing plays through as this beautiful medley of songs that I think is the greatest thing the Beach Boys have ever done, and therefore it deserves a place in your record collection. Mr. Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde. It's really difficult to pick a best Dylan album, but for me, I think this one has the highest number of fantastic songs. Again, one of those albums that's just really, really good front to back. Has this really cool fold out so you can see the man himself in full. One of the first ever double albums, which is really cool, and he's able to last the whole time and not lose interest throughout. My favorite tracks on here are Visions of Joanna, I Want You, Just Like a Woman. It's also good. The last track, Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, it's one of my dad's favorite tracks of all time. It's also one of mine. It is crushing, it's beautiful, it's an epic, and yeah, if you're gonna start somewhere with Bob Dylan, this is a great place to start, although any of his early output, you really can't go wrong. Biggie Smalls, the Notorious B.I.G, Ready to Die. Another one of those hip-hop albums that is almost without haters. Hip-hop can be a polarizing genre, I think, and a lot of people like to have strong opinions, but I've never heard an opinion saying, oh, Ready to Die is not a good album. It's amazing. I mean, this is Biggie's only real collection of songs before he passed away. There are a bunch of other posthumous albums that are collaborations and, you know, just compilations of different tracks he made, but this is his fully actualized record, and while being home to many of his big hits like Juicy and Big Papa, it also has some of the best hip-hop songs of all time, like Machine Gun Funk and Gimme the Loot. The whole album is just on fire. It'll set your room ablaze in the best way, and it is always a crowd pleaser. I feel like if Biggie comes on in any setting, everybody's pretty excited. Neutral Milk Hotel, In the Aeroplane Over the Sea. This was one of my first major indie albums that I really fell in love with, and I think that it holds up to this day. Jeff Mangum is an amazing songwriter, and these songs are so intimate and introspective. It's almost like you're listening to the man's diary. Sometimes it's a bit cryptic, but that's okay. It's one of those albums that you hear more things in the lyrics on follow-up listens, and you get dragged into it further the more time you spend with it. And I think that's the making of a great album, personally. This album is just songwriting at its finest, and while this has become somewhat of a meme to be like, oh, you're an indie person, you like Neutral Milk Hotel. Yeah, I am. And I do. And you probably will too. Fleetwood Mac, Rumours. One of the best-selling records of all time, I believe, especially in modern day as people are getting back into vinyl. These can't stay on the shelves in stores, whether it's indie stores or big box. Rumours is always selling out, and that's because this is one of the earliest perfect records that exists. Front to back, every song, amazing songwriting, and I mean, Stevie Nicks is just mesmerizing to listen to. The big tracks on here are Dreams, Go Your Own Way, The Chain, but everything on here is of that caliber, and if you've only heard the singles of Fleetwood Mac, you are doing yourself a disservice to not hear this record in full. I'm assuming there aren't many people who haven't heard this record in full, but if you haven't, maybe after this video, give it a shot and then try to grab a copy of this, because there's a million pressings of it. It's not too hard to find. I will say that the pressing done at Pallas, P-A-L-L-A-S, in Germany, which is somewhat readily available, I think you can find it for not too much money, is one of the best sounding records I own, up there with the Beach Boys record I just mentioned, so definitely try to get that one if you can. Led Zeppelin 4. You know, it's funny, I feel like everybody who's a Led Zeppelin fan kind of looks down on you if you think this is your favorite Zeppelin album. I don't quite understand why. Yes, it has their biggest commercial hits on it, but overall, this one has the most songs on it that I like, so it's my favorite. Side 1, Black Dog, Rock and Roll, and Stairway to Heaven on the same side. Battle of Evermore is good too, but those three songs on one side, it's like flames coming out of your speakers. And then you get Misty Mountain Hop, Going to California, and When the Levee Breaks on the other side. Going to California is one of my favorite songs ever, and I'm actually talking about that in a video coming out not too long from now. I think that anyone should hear this on vinyl. This is one of those albums that helps you understand why the medium's so great. Just like some of the other ones like Abbey Road I mentioned, this is something that everybody should own. The Zombies, Odyssey and Oracle. amazing early psych rock. They went from kind of early Beatles kind of sounding music on their first album with songs like Tell Her No and, you know, things that are a little simpler. And then they absolutely discovered drugs because they released this album, which the cover alone should show you that this is a journey through Wonderland. The big song from this album is Time of the Season, which closes the album out. A psychedelic ballad that's one of the best psych songs, I think, of all time. But the whole album is really, really good, and it's such a departure from their first record. It's just really amazing that a band evolved in this way so quickly. The Zombies are definitely something that, again, really shows why people love vinyl. When you hear songs like A Rose for Emily on vinyl, you are going to be floored. And last but not least, I can't do a video about essential records on vinyl without talking about Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. This is not my favorite Pink Floyd record. It's probably my number 2. As you guys probably know, Animals is my favorite. But if in terms of essential music, Dark Side of the Moon is absolutely essential. It is one of the greatest albums of all time, from just a quality standpoint and legacy standpoint. I mean, this cover art, you could show this to anyone in the world and they'd probably know who it is. It's just, this is like an image that's burned into the public consciousness. This album is one of those ones that benefits from hearing front to back. It tells a story. It has this overwhelming feeling of being larger than the sum of its parts when you listen to it in full. And I just think this album is such a triumph for the era it came out in the 70s. I mean, there weren't many albums that were this ambitious and this successful. Yeah, I mean, everybody knows Money and Time and some of the bigger standouts from the album, I would say. But I will say that this is one of these albums that you gotta hear in full all the way through to fully appreciate it. Everybody needs a copy of Dark Side of the Moon, so what are you waiting for if you don't have one? So those were my picks for 20 essential albums that you should have in your record collection, new or old. I hope that this provided an interesting twist on some of the videos that exist on YouTube. I know there's a lot of people that share their thoughts. These are just mine. You don't have to agree with me. Either way, though, I would love to see your comments to see if you agree with any of them or if you have ones that you think I've missed. I do have a lot more on a list. I had to cut it down to 20 for the sake of this video not being an hour long. But if you want me to do more parts, I can probably do another part as well. Just let me know. I hope you guys enjoyed this and learned something. Maybe you're off to go buy one of these and add it to your collection, which if you are, mission accomplished. Thank you guys for watching this video. More coming soon. Take it easy.